Alright guys, so this is a new series of videos I'm going to do. We'll basically look at each of the laws of magic and basically go through some of the tactics involved in playing with it and against it. Because I know a lot of people, if you watch sort of people play, you watch videos on YouTube, there's a lot of spells and a lot of scenarios that people tend to get tripped up on because they don't know the simple ways to play their way out those situations. And a lot of it revolves around magic, sort of what targets, what spells to target to cast, what spells to target to dispel, etc., etc. And if you really break it down and think about each of the magic laws, they become very easy to play against and play with. So I'm just going to go through in the order that they are in the book. Like, I'm not going to choose like my favourites or anything like that, or the ones I'm most comfortable with. I'm just going to go through the order in the book, starting with Law of Fire. So the rulebook. This is what the rulebook says about the Law of Fire. This is on page 163 in the little rulebook for those that are interested in where this stuff is. The rulebook says about the Law of Fire it has its basis in powerful ranged attack spells designed to wreak massive damage on your foes. If you see your wizards as essentially magical artillery, then the Law of Fire is probably the one for you. Now that in a sense is true, except it doesn't wreak massive damage on anything at all. The Law of Fire is primarily, well, it's pretty much in its entirety is designed just to do damage, just to chip wounds off here and there. It doesn't really have any amazing debuff spells. It's got one really good augment spell, but the rest are just magic missiles, direct damage, just built to do damage to your opponent. The lore attribute, Kindle Flame, it's kind of pointless. It doesn't ever really come into play. It doesn't really affect the way that you play Law of Fire in any way. Basically, if you target a unit that's been hit by a Law of Fire spell with another wizard, you get plus D3 to your next casting, which is kind of pointless because a lot of the casting values are pretty low anyway. So getting an extra D3 is not really going to change much. It'd be nicer if it increased the strength of your magic missiles or increase the number of hits you did, things like that. But the extra D3 doesn't really make a difference. So the Law of Fire is you need to understand how bad this law is to play it well. And that sounds stupid, but basically, Law of Fire has 2, possibly 3 good spells depending on who you're playing against. You've got your Fireball, you've got your Flaming Sword of Ruin, and if you're playing against lots of big, low toughness hordes, Fulminating Flame Cage is fantastic. The rest of the spells, you've got Cascading Fire Cloak, which is basically like Shield of Thorns from Law of Life, where it does a number of hits in base contact with the wizard and his unit. You've got the Burning Head, which is sort of like a strength 4 cannonball, which is really crap. Piercing Bolts of Burning can be quite good. It does like a certain number of strength 4 hits based on how many ranks are in the target unit. And you've got Flamestorm, which is a really, really weak like template. So basically, you want to try and ignore those 4 spells because they're really, really weak. So how do we play these 3 spells? Let's assume that we're in a situation where all 3 are going to be really effective for you. So, Fulminating Flame Cage, you've got lots of big units of toughness 3 guys, so that, when every model in the unit takes a strength 4 hit, it's going to do some decent damage. Then you've got Fireball and you've got Flaming Sword. So the way to play Law of Fire is you need to use your Fireballs effectively. This is quite often why you see Law of Fire on your level 2 or your level 1 backup wizard, because Law of Fire is basically designed to spam Fireballs at the hard to kill like chaff units, like your skirmishers, like your small 5-10 man skirmish units that you can't hit effectively with ballistic skill based shooting, but you don't want to commit a combat unit to take it out. So you'll quite often see Fireballs, just a D6 version, just to ping off some wounds off like things like Skinks, off Way Watchers, off Shadow Warriors, off Shades. They're little annoying like units that you don't really want to commit a lot of damage to. So you want to try and keep your Fireball, throw that out first at a target that's not, massively going to be a problem for your opponent, but it's important for you to get rid of. Because you want to create this scenario in your opponent's mind that they know it's going to be bad, but you've got something worse. And this is the kind of thing you need to do with all the laws of magic. It's about, playing off the psychological game of do you want to stop this? Oh, I've got something better, or maybe this is my best spell, and it's just that psychological mind game. So you use your Fireball effectively to chip away at the chaff. I mean, when you're feeling brave, you can throw like a big 3d6 Fireball, that's something like a Hydra or a Help It or a Chimera, things with regen. Because that can be a really effective way at putting wounds on them, getting past that regen save. But primarily, I would use Fireball to take out Chaff, to hit things like Fast Cav. Things you don't want to waste more potent shooting and combat units on. Then you've got Flaming Sword of Ruin. Now, your Flaming Sword of Ruin is probably your number one spell. Simply because you get +1 to wound. So if you're low to medium strength, you go from wounded on 5s or 4s to 3s and 4s, which can be massive. If you're high strength, you can go from wounded on 3s to wounded on 2s, which again can be a huge difference. But the most important thing is you get magical attacks and flaming attacks. So this spell, you're going up against a Troll Horde, you're going up against the Chimera, Help It's, Hydras, everything I said a second ago. All these things that are devastating with regen. Well, now you've got flaming attacks and you just cut through them. So you need to time your flaming sword to perfection. And to do so is kind of hard because your opponent will know that you're going to get flaming attacks and they'll want to stop it. And that's kind of why you need to use your Fireball first and try and pick an important target that they're going to want to keep alive. And you use... I kind of think of it like a boxer would, where they use the jab as the guiding point. It's actually Fireball. You feel them out with the Fireball, with the jab. And then your Flaming Sword is like your hook that you swing around to really do the damage. If you think of it in terms of like a boxing analogy like that. So primarily, those are the two spells that are going to be the most effective for you in Lore of Fire. It's a very, very weak lore, so there's not a lot of amazing tactical output to think about. The Fulminating Flame Cage is going to be your big spell. When you see that big horde of Toughens 3 guys, this is going to not necessarily be your 6 dice spell, but it's going to be the one you want to push through because it's going to wreak some massive, massive damage on that unit. And of course, it's I think, no, it's not a Remains in Play, but I don't want to read it word for word for obviously copyright issues. But yeah, so basically, Fulminating Flame Cage not only does D6 strength 4 hits, but then if the target moves, that's when they get hit. So basically, you can use the Fulminating Flame Cage to pin a unit in place. If you're worried about getting flanked, or I don't know, maybe a unit going into the Watchtower or something like that, then you can throw the Fulminating Flame Cage on there, and then it may deter your opponent from moving that unit, and it can buy you some time. So that's the way to think of Fulminating Flame Cage. It's not necessarily the damage output, but the fact that it may buy you that little turn to get other units into position, to maybe flank them later, or to protect the flank of one unit that's already in combat. So kind of playing with Lore of Fire, that's the way I would do it. Use the Fireball first, try and pull out some Dispel dice, pick the important combats to get Flaming Sword of Ruin on. The other thing I've seen people do with the Flaming Sword of Ruin is it's kind of gamey, but it's completely within the rules of the spell. For example, you're playing Ogres, you've got a Fire Belly. You get Flaming Sword of Ruin, stick it on your Iron Blaster. You've suddenly got a Flaming Cannon. Just saying. So yeah, you want to leave your Fireball, get the important Flaming Sword off, and then to really, really, put the pressure on your opponent and to do some damage and buy that turn, Fulminating Flame Cage on the big unit. Now, defending this Lore of Fire, it's pretty much the exact opposite of what I've just said. You need to know which fireballs to stop and which ones to let go through. If you've got lots of chaff, for example, you need to throw the chaff into positions where it's going to seem like they're going to be effective, but really you don't care if they die. You're trying to draw out that fireball. You're trying to waste those power dice on the fireball so you can stop Flaming Sword. If, for example, if I'm playing Warriors of Chaos and I've got Trolls and Chimeras, and I'm up against an army that's got a powerful combat unit using the Lore of Fire, I know they're going to try and get Flaming Sword off to combat my regen units. So I might throw up all my units of dogs, really close to their war machines or their bunkers or whatever, and try and draw that fireball and focus all my dispel attempts on the Flaming Sword. and this is, again, it's the whole psychological game of what's important to spell and what isn't. Lore of Fire is kind of the easy one to defend against because it is so weak. It's a lot harder to get the lore working in your favour than it is to defend against it. So I'm going to say that now. But basically, I say you've got to know which fireballs are going to hurt you and which ones you can afford to let through. Because Fireball is the leading spell. It's the best spell in the lore, probably. And of course, this makes it, if you've got nothing in your army with regen, and you don't necessarily care about the +1 to wound or the magical attacks, then you can let Flaming Sword go and stop Fireball. It all depends on what's in your army and how it's going to work. So if you've not got a lot of things vulnerable to flaming attacks, then you can let Flaming Sword be the lead. You can let that go through and focus on stopping Fireball and Flame Cage. Conversely, if you have nothing in your army that's weak to Flame Cage, you may just want to let that go through. I've let every single time Flame Cage has been cast on my warriors, I've let it go through. I don't care. I'm toughness 4. I've got good armor. You've seen this on my battle reports. People cast it on like the Gorby's Chariot. I don't care. It's going to do 1 strength 4 hit. I'm toughness 6. I get an armor save. I'm not afraid of Flame Cage. However, with my high elves, if Flame Cage goes on my White Lions, now I'm in a problem because I need to be pushing those White Lions forward. But I'm toughness 3 with no armor. I don't want to take, I don't want to take the strength 4 hits. So I need to focus on stopping Flame Cage. Whereas I can let Flaming Sword go through because there's nothing really in my army that's weak to flaming attacks, and I'm already going to be hit, wounded on high numbers anyway. So it's this kind of thing you need to think about is what you're weak to in the Law of Fire. Fireball is probably the one you want to stop, probably, depending on what you've got. Again, if you're running, something ridiculous like, I don't know, like a Monster Mash where having a couple of wounds chipped off here and there is not really going to bother you, you might be safe with Fireball. But yeah, that's kind of Law of Fire. I mean, it's probably the weakest one to start with, in a sense, because there's not a lot of tactical back and forth in the Law of Fire. It's pretty straightforward. It's going to be a duel of the fireballs. Can you afford to let it go through? Does your opponent need to push it through? Etc, etc. So I hope, this video's kind of been a help. I'm going to do the next 7 laws of magic, and I hope that, it helps you guys out and the way to play against them. So, hope you enjoyed it, guys. Bye.